everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I am Bryson Carver, back with you guys with a jam-packed, football-filled Monday show. We got college football a little bit later toward the end of the show, predicting the College Football Playoff Semifinal games. Four really interesting matchups in different ways. Obviously, you talk about Boise State, Penn State. You talk about Texas, Arizona State. You got the game I'm most excited for. I think most of America's excited for. The Ohio State Buckeyes and my national championship pick, the Oregon Ducks, and then, of course, Notre Dame and Georgia. Predict those games at the end of the show, as well as Lions and 49ers. We got to talk about why Aaron Rodgers got to retire, why Joe Burrow is putting together one of the most impressive seasons that any quarterback's ever had in the history of the NFL. Given the context of it, he probably isn't going to win MVP, even if the Bengals were to sneak in the playoffs at 9-8. But get to that. Saquon Barkley chasing Eric Dickerson. I'm seeing way too many folks saying, oh, there's an asterisk next to Saquon because he'll have played one more game to get to Eric Dickerson's rushing record, which he's 101 yards and potentially one game away from breaking. Get to all those things, and at the end of the show, a tribute to two legends that we lost over the last few days in different realms. Let's get into football, though. But first, game I was most excited about this weekend, America's Game of the Week on Fox. Green Bay Packers, Minnesota Vikings from US Bank Stadium, which, for the record, Minnesota's going to play. Minnesota wins 27-25. I'm just going to say this because I've said it all season long. If the Vikings beat Detroit next Sunday night, and what a game that will be. Holy cow. You want to talk about a home field advantage for Minnesota as the 1 seed. The road to the Super Bowl in the NFC got to run through Minnesota and that fan base and that home field advantage. Shout out to Vikings fans because y'all show up and show out. That place is deafening. But Minnesota wins 27-25. Sam Darnold's the story once again. So Sam Darnold just yesterday, 33 of 43, 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have an interception. He had a QBR 0 to 100 of 79 and a passer rating of 116. You know, the thing with Sam Darnold, and I have been very, very, very cautious on my buying into Sam Darnold. The reason is because I got burnt before. Sam Darnold, I didn't have a show back in the day, but in 2018, that NFL draft, and what all of a sudden looks like an amazing quarterback draft. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Josh Rosen didn't work out, but those four have really panned out. Took the first two a long time to do so. Love Darnold. He's got a big arm. He moves well. He's a little reckless, a little Josh Allen-esque, at least in that regard. Then he goes to the Jets, and what have I said about the Jets for years? It's the place where all young quarterbacks' dreams go to die, and evidently old quarterbacks' dreams these days as well. Well, he doesn't work with the Jets. And then where does he go? Carolina. Yeah, Baker's been great since leaving Carolina, and Sam's been great since leaving Carolina. A little detours for those two with the Rams and with the Niners, respectively. But I think what we've got to talk about Sam Darnold is a couple of things. We'll get to the contract stuff in about 3, 4, 5 minutes. But it is yet another win in the column for, man, in the NFL, is a quarterback where you go matters. A wide receiver, by and large, can be successful. I mean, I saw Malik Neighbors yesterday with the Giants. Just crush it. And now that he gets Drew Lock, nice backup quarterback. Probably not the greatest thing for the Giants that they won, but at the same time, we know Malik Neighbors can ball. Okay, we see, I mean, at the beginning of Myles Garrett's career when the Browns sucked, we still were like, yeah, that guy's awesome. But as a quarterback, you need so many variables, even the best, to go in your favor in order to be successful. The fact that with 1 or 2 things going his way and not much else, Joe Burrow doing what he's doing in Cincinnati, it's remarkable. Get to him in about a half hour. But the coach has to be the right guy. And he needed an offensive line. And he needed at least one really, really talented receiver, preferably 2. It sure as heck be nice to have a good running game. Defense, we'll see. And what the heck division are you in? Well, Sam Darnold happens to play in the toughest division in football. But he's got Kevin O'Connell. And he's got, the best receiver in the game, Justin Jefferson. All due respect to Jamar Chase, JJ's the man. And Jordan Addison, one of the best number 2 receivers. And TJ Hawkinson, Iowa tight end. That's what they do in Iowa. Okay. By the way, O-line's really good. They lost Darisaw for the season, their left tackle. They haven't lost since. And for those that are maybe not watching close enough to the games and maybe have this opinion, one that I've had about another quarterback I've been skeptical about for some time, Brock Purdy. Well, this is Brock Purdy. Kevin O'Connell calling plays. He's got better offensive line than Purdy had, but comparable weapons. Aaron Jones running the football. Great defense. Brian Flores ain't going to be in Minnesota for much longer, folks. That guy's going to get a head coaching job, or should. You're like, some of this really goes in Sam's favor. Here's the difference. And this is where you do actually have to watch the games and not just look at stat sheets, to where Darnold's numbers aren't quite as good as Purdy's last year. Pretty darn solid. Matter of fact, we could show you Sam's numbers this season. Great graphic here by Alfred once again. Sam's fourth in touchdowns, doesn't throw a lot of picks, third in yards, ninth in completion percentage, and fifth in fifth in passer rating. So Sam Darnold, top 10 in basically everything. He's been fantastic. By the way, should be a sneaky MVP favorite or candidate, at least certainly if the Vikings beat the Lions on Sunday. I just want to put that out there. Okay. The difference between him and Brock Purdy, again, eye test. How many throws? Just last week against the Seahawks when he made that throw to Justin Jefferson to beat Seattle last week, it's like, oh my God, that's like a Mahomes throw. That's like a Josh Allen throw. Like, oh dang, Justin Herbert can make that throw. Like, where's that been? Well, it had wasted away with a horrible organization, the Jets, and another horrible organization, the Carolina Panthers. And he had a cup of coffee with the San Francisco 49ers, got in the Shanahan system, backed up Purdy for a year, ended up starting one game at the end of the season, kind of got a football education in some ways in the way Baker Mayfield did with the Rams. Speaking of Baker, who accomplished more objectively in Cleveland than Darnold did with the Jets, no question about it. Baker went to the playoffs, won a playoff game. But there was always a hard ceiling for a guy like Baker going to Cleveland, and maybe even harder one going to Carolina. But he goes to the Rams. He has a couple of nice starts with the Rams. Remember that Thursday night game when he ran for like 48 hours and then led a 99-yard game-winning drive? Like, just being with a smart offensive coach like Sean McVay. Same thing with Darnold, with Kyle Shanahan. Recalibrate. Figure out what you got to do. Learn to play the position smartly, efficiently, and to the best of your God-given abilities at the NFL level. And now you're seeing the best of Sam Darnold. You're seeing the guy at a USC that folks like myself, who was a Darnold guy at the time, thought, hey, maybe he could be that. I mean, even Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in football, sure helps he's got Andy Reid. It sure helped Brady that he had Bill Belichick and the smart coaching staff in New England to ease him along until eventually when Brady became GOAT Brady, then he could pretty much go on by himself at that point because we saw what he did in Tampa. It's the greatest ever, obviously. Joe Montana didn't hurt matters. He had Bill Walsh, all the great teams. It didn't help that some of those Steelers teams had, Chuck Noll. I mean, we can go up down in NFL history. And so it's for these young quarterbacks. I mean, is it a coincidence? We'll get to the Washington Commanders in about 10 minutes. Is it a coincidence that the two best looking rookie quarterbacks went to the two best, or just so happened to be with the two best coaching staffs? Jane Daniels is crushing it with Dan Quinn as his head coach. Cliff Kingsbury's his OC. Bo Nix has been really good in Denver with Sean Payton, the quarterback whisperer. Oh, shocker. Caleb Williams, who's had his moments certainly with Matt Eberflus and Thomas Brown. Yeah. Oh, and Shane Waldron, who got fired before him. Drake May shows promise, but, Alex Van Pelt, I think, who believes the Patriots OC, a little shaky, doesn't have very many weapons. O-line's bad. What a shocker. Two best rookie quarterbacks have been with the two best coaches, at least, that have gotten the rookie quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr., we'll see. I love the kid, but only 2 starts in. Where you go matters. Unless you're Peyton Manning. I mean, Peyton Manning was never going to fail in the NFL. He was a generational talent. Andrew Luck was never going to fail. I thought Trevor Lawrence was in that category. I don't think Trevor's failed. He hasn't lived up to being the number 1 pick. I still believe in Trevor, but where you end up goes a long, long, long way. I mean, you don't think it's helped Lamar Jackson that he's had John Harbaugh? It's not to discredit these guys. Michael Jordan needed Phil Jackson. Steph Curry needed Steve Kerr. Tim Duncan needed Greg Popovich. That's just how it works. And so shout out Sam Darnold, who the question now becomes, does Minnesota keep him? Should they, franchise tag him, sign him to a long-term extension? So I hate the franchise tag, but if push comes to shove, the Vikings are going to have to at least employ that. Sam is going to get some calls from teams. I wouldn't mind if my Steelers, put in for Mr. Darnold's services. The Raiders might. Other teams could throw their hat in the ring. Here's the conversation that I don't love. I understand, but I'm not a crazy fan of. Is the, hey, Darnold needs to take a discount to stay with the Vikings because that's the best situation of the teams that could potentially be available. We mentioned O'Connell, the weapons. The defense won't be as good because Flores is going to take a head coaching job in all likelihood, but still excellent situation. So he's got to take less to stay with them because it's a better spot. Here's what I would say. If I'm Sam Darnold's camp, okay, while that is true, while Connell might be right now the coach of the year, now my Steelers have kind of tailed off. Denver may not make the playoffs. We'll see. I think O'Connell right now would be my coach of the year. All those things are true. But if I'm Sam Darnold in Sam Darnold's camp, I'd say, well, at the same time, y'all didn't go crazy far with Kirk Cousins. I mean, you made the playoffs one year when you won all those one-score games, then you lost to Daniel Jones, and then Kirk got hurt last year, and you ran through a bunch of backups. You weren't that good. Sure, J.J. McCarthy's there, but is J.J. McCarthy can we put that up one more time, going to give you that? Maybe. I mean, O'Connell's a great coach, and Justin Jefferson's a monster, but I doubt it. Certainly not off the bat. Don't mess with a good thing you got going. Again, this is not system quarterback stuff. This isn't, okay, he's going to work off play action. We're going to kind of, we're going to be a death by 1,000 cuts type of offense. No. They're like, Sam, sling it. Just throw it all over the yard, okay? We trust you. Made some big-time throws. Threw the one interception, but made some big-time throws over the course of that game and all season long. The throw against Seattle to Jefferson could not have been thrown any better than that to win the game last week. So, and by the way, if nothing else, if we need any evidence that the Vikings really like Sam Darnold, here's Sammy after the game with his team. I think they like him. And how cool of a moment is that for Sam Darnold? All the stuff that he's been through in his career, having to deal with the Jets and Carolina, and nobody believes in him. He's backing up Purdy in San Francisco, and now he's getting his, as the March Madness song goes, one shining moment, and he has not only capitalized on it, he's made himself a lot of money this offseason. I think the Vikings would be out of their minds not to bring him back. What's the rush for J.J. McCarthy? Who's to say you can't sit him a few years and it be not quite Jordan Love, because Aaron Rodgers was older than Darnold, but sort of like a Jordan Love. I mean, how great of a spot would that be for that kid to get to sit behind Darnold, and you got O'Connell and all these guys. So, and by the way, who's your best quarterback? Who gives you the best chance to win a Super Bowl this year and maybe next year? It's Darnold. I think the Vikings got to keep him. Quickly on Green Bay, though, and then we'll move on to the great Sunday night game last night between the two rookie quarterbacks. Again, something I pride myself on the show in doing to the very best of my ability is to be relatively consistent on my takes. Now, unless my take is just objectively wrong and it would be full-blown stubborn and going directly against facts to hold on to the opinion. When I have a take, I don't give it unless I feel 100% strongly about it, and I usually try my very hardest to absolutely stay to it and state my claim to it. Green Bay has not been that. So coming into the season, I thought, okay, really young, the Houston Texans of the NFC. Right now, they're a much better track than Houston, but young, quarterback we all love, coach we all love, loaded young wide receiving core, defensive pieces. We like them. Not quite ready to take the leap and go to Super Bowl in a stat conference. And then I saw them play. I'm like, yeah, that's about what they're like. They're going to make the playoffs. The Packers are in the playoffs. They've won 11 games, probably going to win 12. They're talented. Okay, they're winning games. They won some games with Malik Willis at quarterback, which is a credit to Matt LaFleur. And then they have a moment where they lose to the Lions on Thursday night, and I'm like, okay, they don't beat the good teams. Like they're at that point, I think they were 500 or so, or under 500 against teams with a winning record. They were 0-for against the Vikings, the Eagles, and the Lions, the three best teams in the conference. And then they bludgeon Seattle. Now, not like I see the Seahawks as this big contender, but they go to Seattle and just hammer the Seahawks. And then they do what they got to do last week against the Saints. I'm like, okay, well, Jordan Love did it last year. Second half of the season got hot. Now you got Josh Jacobs. We know LaFleur can coach. And by the way, last year, destroyed Dallas. Probably should have beaten San Francisco if Purdy's interceptions hadn't been dropped. So I'm like, okay, maybe that could be repeatable. I'm back to square one here. This team is too inconsistent. I saw the stat on Jordan Love where in the first, do we have this? The first 8 drives of the game, Jordan Love had a passer rating of 63. The last 2 drives of the game, he had a passer rating of 134. So it's very much, again, he's young-ish. Roller coaster, still trying to find his way. I mean, has Jordan Love started 20 games? I guess he has started 20 games. He's not to his 30th start in the league yet. So it's still this growth and maturation process and figuring out what works for Jordan. And so there's the Packers have a championship upside. I just don't know if they have the championship, not even mindset, but just maturity. I mean, the coach, Matt LaFleur, we all think is really good. Again, it's too much of a roller coaster for Jordan Love. Especially, listen, Green Bay right now, the bad news for the Packers is they went from a team that had an outside chance a few weeks ago at being the 5 seed. You look at the playoff standings now, thanks to Washington last night, Green Bay's the 7 seed. Green Bay is the 7 seed, and they're going to be locked in there as long as Washington can beat Dallas on Sunday, which they should. So the Packers will be the 7 seed and go to Philly, who they lost to. Remember that slippery game in Brazil? I don't know if I love the Packers going to Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley, we assume Jalen Hurts will be healthy. All those weapons, great Eagles defense. I don't love Green Bay at that matchup. Now, had they gone on the road to like the Rams or something, as shaky as that LA offense has looked as of late, maybe I'd give them a shot. Sure. They might even be favored to win the game. There'd be a lot of Packers fans there. So I just think, listen, my preseason prediction for the Packers was 11 wins, wild card, out in round 1 to an NFC East team. It looks like it's going to be pretty close. 12 wins, wild card team, out in round 1 to an NFC East opponent. Now, I thought it was going to be Dallas and the Cowboys would get revenge. Looks like it's going to be Philadelphia. Next year, yeah, the Packers, you can absolutely call them a contender, but I still think they need to go through a little bit of maturation, go through the fire once again, come up short against a contender like Philadelphia, and then, be ready to go next year with a revamped group. Now, they didn't have Christian Watson, but again, the thing I've talked about the Packers all season long is that is the deepest group of young wide receivers I've seen in some time. Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, Jaden Reed. You got 2 excellent tight ends. Josh Jacobs, like the pieces are obviously there. And Matt LaFleur's the coach. Love is the quarterback. You're good. I just don't think they're quite ready for that run yet. We saw last year, the missed kicks, the dropped interceptions, just weren't quite ready to meet the moment. And I think that applies to Green Bay this year. So, don't think the Packers are quite ready yet. I mean, right now, they're 0-2 against the Vikings, 0-2 against the Lions, 0-1 against Philly, 0-5 against the 3 top contenders in the NFC. That matters. So you got to take those into consideration when you're talking about the Packers as a potential Super Bowl contender, which I don't think they are. Shifting to the Sunday night game last night, Washington and Atlanta, which I couldn't believe this. I believe I gave the stat, I think, on Thursday's show when I predicted this game. It was my episode of the week. I took Atlanta. Heart was broken last night in that regard. But it was the first time that if I saw the stat correctly, the first time that 2 first-round rookie quarterbacks faced off in primetime, ever, which that really surprised me. I can't believe we haven't had some number 1, number 2 pick matchups. Apparently not. But Jaden Daniels hit those number 2 overall pick, got the best of the number 8 overall pick, Michael Penix Jr., because the Commanders beat the Atlanta Falcons 30-24 in overtime. And Jaden Daniels was sensational once again. Washington is, we talked about Sam Darnold be the prime example of where you go matters. Washington is a perfect example of we really, we talk about it, but I don't know if we put enough weight under the man, an owner is everything in sports. It's get the owner right, which you can't get the owner. The owner buys the team, and he's got the team. That's how it works. But ever since Josh Harris and Magic Johnson bought the team from Dan Snyder mid 2023, summer of 2023, it's been a different feel around this team. And you know what Josh Harris has done? And I give him major kudos because this is what bad organizations do to turn it back around. This is what the Lions did. This is what all the successful teams in the NFL have done. They've kind of modeled Detroit in some ways, other than drafting a rookie quarterback in the first round. Okay, what does Detroit do? How are we going to pick our GM? We're going to take a guy from a smart franchise, the Los Angeles Rams. Brad Holmes was with the Rams. We're taking from the Rams. He's going to be our GM, and Brad Holmes has crushed every draft in Detroit. What do the Washington Commanders do? Okay, is there any smart people who... Adam Peters. Adam Peters worked with the San Francisco 49ers, was a scout with the Patriots for a long time. Okay, well, if the Patriots and Belichick thought he was good enough, Okay, if the Niners thought he was smart, Denver, when they had Peyton Manning, John Elway, they thought he was pretty smart. Well, evidently he's pretty good. Let's hire him to be our GM. Adam Peters thus far, pretty good job. Who do we pick as our coach? Let's see. Okay, that Dan Quinn guy. Well, he's been to a Super Bowl. We can talk about the blown lead, but he went to a Super Bowl. He went to the playoffs another time with Atlanta. Okay, he was a really good defensive coordinator in Dallas. Culture builder, that's probably the guy. And he's going to bring in Cliff Kingsbury. And then we're going to draft Jaden Daniels, who, listen, there's no guarantee Jaden Daniels is going to hit, but thanks that he has, because of the coaching staff in part, Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury is the OC. Now you have structure. Now you have smart people making decisions to determine the future of your franchise. And Washington is not a contender this season. They're not, again, very much like Green Bay, just not ready yet. You don't want to face them in the first round. I mean, if you're the Los Angeles Rams, the way the playoffs look right now in the NFC, if you look playoff bracket in the NFC, if we could pull this up, I believe the Rams would face off. I believe so. Yeah, the Rams would face off against the Commanders in the wild card round. I'd probably take the Rams just because of my strong belief in Stafford and McVay and the weapons. I don't love that young defense against that quarterback. The way he can move, the way he's been. I mean, by the way, you want to talk about clutch gene? You want to talk about a clutch gene with Jaden Daniels? Here's this stat. This is wild stuff. Okay, I saw this tweet from Tony Holzman Serrano. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Jaden Daniels, this is crazy, folks, has 5 pass touchdowns in the last 30 seconds or in overtime, which is 2 more than any quarterback in a single season since the 1970 merger. So basically, last 30 seconds of regulation or an OT, Daniels has 5 touchdowns, 2 more than any quarterback in that span in a single season ever. So when you need Jaden Daniels coming up the clutch, he does that. Game-winning touchdown to Ertz this week, Jamison Crowder last week. Like, this guy with his arm, with his legs, there was sort of this narrative, okay, he's like the second coming to a degree of Lamar Jackson. Lamar couldn't. Now, Lamar's a good thrower of the football now. Lamar did not come in the league throwing the football this well. Now, some of that is Daniels was in college for a long time, Arizona State, LSU, but throws the football well, is not only moves well, but man, again, we talk about intangibles at this position. This is what separates the good quarterbacks from the amazing ones. And Daniels is not amazing. He's a rookie. We got to wait. I mean, CJ Stroud had a sophomore slump. We got to see it, develop over time. But man, this kid is cool, calm, collected, smiling. Moment's not too big for him. If someone messes up, he's tapping on the helmet. It's all right. It's all right, my man. We're gonna get him next time. A quarterback and a coach, but on the field, the quarterback sets the temperature in the room. It could be 10 degrees in Buffalo, or it can be 90 degrees in Jacksonville. Doesn't matter. Quarterback sets the temperature. Who are we going to be emotionally as a football team? Jaden Daniels does not run hot. He doesn't run cold. He's steady. He's loose. He plays loose in some ways, and not in a bad way. Like, he plays like you and I were playing backyard flag football. Now, some of that is because he's one of the most athletic humans on the field at any point in time. But I just give Washington a ton of credit. Like, this used to be the Commanders, prior to Dan Snyder purchasing them, one of the most successful organizations in football. I mean, prior to the turn of the century, they were 3-time Super Bowl champions. Okay, that Joe Gibbs, one of the greatest coaches of all time, doesn't get enough credit. Won 3 Super Bowls with 3 quarterbacks. Okay, they won I believe they won in the 80s, couple in the 80s, I believe. And I think one in the 90s. Were a successful team. They had good quarterbacks and great defenses, and Joe Gibbs. And then Dan Snyder buys the team and screws everything up. Messes up coaching hires, botches a bunch of drafts, screwed up the RG3 thing, somehow managed to screw it up with Mike Shanahan and the crazy young, talented offensive assistants they had in Washington, like Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan. Blew that. Get that guy, maybe the worst owner in sports, out of the building. Josh Harris, Magic Johnson. We're going to come in and we're going to employ people who've been there and done that, who smart organizations have hired to be a part of their franchises. I mean, Dan Quinn's won a Super Bowl as a DC with the Seattle Seahawks, went to one as the head coach of the Falcons, and was a good DC in Dallas. Well, he'll probably work. He's a good culture guy. He'll fix our defense. Let's bring him in. Now, Washington's defense still isn't great, but that's more a personnel problem than it is a Dan Quinn problem. Like, they're going to go defense heavy in the draft. Go get Adam Peters, who worked with the San Francisco 49ers. He was their assistant general manager the last few years. Let's go bring him in. I mean, it really is a yet another tale of Man, if the owner's smart, like you should be good. You'll have down years, it happens, but if the owner's good, you're in good shape. If he employs a good GM who hires a good head coach and the GM does well in the draft, scouting department, the whole bit, you'll be a successful franchise. In the NFL, Washington in some ways is a little bit like Texas, the Texas Longhorns of the NFL, where the sport's just better when Washington's good. I mean, just in general, like I don't know how the Capitals are doing in the NHL. I don't follow hockey, but yeah, I mean, the Nationals aren't very good, and the Wizards are the worst team in basketball. Like it's good for the nation's capital for a big market like that to have a good sports team. They certainly have that in Washington. And listen, if they beat Dallas, they're going to finish with 12 wins. See what they do in the playoffs. Future's very bright for this franchise, and they should be very proud of themselves for what they've been able to accomplish in a very, very short amount of time. Should Washington. And they'll be, listen, they're not a contender. They're not there yet. They'll be a handful for the Rams or for Philly. They've beaten Philly. I get it. Hurts missed that game, but they did beat the Philadelphia Eagles. So, and by the way, one last thing, we'll go to break. I was the proponent of, man, they messed with that terrible towel against Pittsburgh. And they had that little skid, the curse of the terrible towel. Looks like it's all gone now. I'm not going to say if they lose in the playoffs is the curse of the terrible towel. That will have applied. Washington's gotten back on their feet. Daniels is healthy. Ribs are good. Hey, don't want to face them in the first round of the playoffs. I'll tell you that much. All right, be back in 1 minute to talk about Joe Burrow. What is an unreal season he's having right now, and why it's one of the greatest carry jobs that I've seen by a quarterback in my life watching the NFL. Be back in just 1 minute, Carving Up Live. We're just getting started, baby. Stay tuned, y'all. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. In about 10 minutes, I'll tell you why Aaron Rodgers needs to retire from the New York Jets and from professional football. Get into that in about 10 minutes. Let's talk about Joe Burrow. So I may be a Steelers fan. Well, there's no maybe. I am a Steelers fan. I am a Steelers fan, but I could still give credit where credit is due and respect the greats that play the position of quarterback, and Joe Burrow certainly classifies that. I'm not talking about greats in the sense of Mount Rushmore type of dudes, but he is without question one of the three best quarterbacks in the National Football League. Best game of the weekend was not played on Sunday. It was played on Saturday afternoon, bleeding to Saturday night between the Denver Broncos and the Bengals. Bengals had to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. A win, or in the case of overtime, which it went there, a tie would have sent Denver to the playoffs. Cincinnati wins 30-24, same score as the Washington game last night, and Joe Burrow was nothing short of phenomenal. 39 of 49, 412 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR 0-100 of 91, and a passer rating of 122. What we are seeing right now is one of the greatest carry jobs I've seen by a quarterback in my life. I'm not saying that Joe Burrow should be MVP, although I've always been in the mindset, I'm talking NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, it's a little bit harder to decipher, but those two sports in particular, that MVP should in fact go to the most valuable player. Now, in that case, I guess Mahomes should win it every year because, I mean, come on now. They've won 3 out of 5 Super Bowls. With that said, I don't care if this team finishes 9-8 and they're out of the playoffs. Josh Allen, as currently as we see here today, and the Bills are probably going to rest their guys because they're the 2 seed. You know, get a little bit of bye week for Josh and some of the players. Josh would be my MVP, given the load he's carried with the fact that he's improved. I think his stats don't reflect it drastically as a player, and that he's cut out the reckless turnovers and reckless plays in general. Josh Allen be my MVP. Joe Burrow's number 2. Folks, can we show you his numbers this season because they're ridiculous? He's first in passing touchdowns. He's only thrown 8 picks. 42 touchdowns, 8 picks. That's remarkable. First in yards, 5th in completion percentage, 3rd in passer rating, 3rd in QBR. And this is his 8th straight game. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Burrow, his 8th straight game with 250 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's essentially putting the team on his back offensively, not turn the ball over, bunch of attempts, bunch of yards, touchdowns, not to turn the football over. And meanwhile, the Cincinnati defense is doing anything they can to lose, giving up the long touchdown to Mims, who made an incredible catch in the backcourt in the end zone at the end of regulation. And the kicker, Cade York, shanking a short field goal. You know how I feel about kickers in those spots? My thing is, oh my God, the guys on offensive defense have fought their guts out for 3.5 hours. And your job is not to memorize a playbook, execute a play. Your job is to make a kick, especially a chip shot kick that was the distance of an extra point, doinked it. And fortunately for Cincinnati, they were able to stop Denver, and Joe Burrow drove him down and threw a game-winning pass to T. Higgins, who, by the way, probably isn't going to be a Bengal after the next 1 to 2 games. T. Higgins is not going to get paid because Jamar Chase has not been paid. This is a notoriously cheap organization. Mike Brown and the front office in Cincinnati, they don't have an indoor practicing facility still. 2024, you're going to play indoor games. They don't have an indoor practice facility, or when it is a thunderstorm or something. It's a cheap franchise with a coach in Zach Taylor, who I've always been like, don't love Zach Taylor, don't hate Zach Taylor. They botched the clock at the end of regulation, but that's not unique to Zach Taylor. He doesn't really screw up much. That was a screw up in the terms of clock, but Zach Taylor doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. Team seems to like him. I don't know if Joe Burrow, there was an incident between Burrow and Taylor. We'll see. Taylor's fine. I mean, he's not bad. He's not great. He's fine. Jamar Chase is all world. T. Higgins, amazing. Top 15 receiver in the game today, potentially. Tight end's fine. Running game, Defense is bad, straight up bad. Oh, let's see. We play in the second toughest division in the game against Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, and the well-run Steelers, coached by Mike Tomlin. And, oh, by the way, the owner doesn't spend money like ever. Ever. I think we're going to view this Joe Burrow run. I'm hesitant to say this because, by the way, it happens to be the name that I'm about to mention, happens to be his birthday. Happy birthday, LeBron James, 40 years old, still balling out. Shout out LeBron. And shout out, by the way, Sandy Koufax and Tiger Woods. It's their birthday as well. Apparently, December 30th is the birthday for greats. But remember LeBron took that Cavs team to the finals in 2007? And everybody knew there was no chance they were going to beat the Tim Duncan Spurs. But it was like, remember that he had he scored, I think, 29 to the Cavs, last 30 points in that game 5 against Detroit, and it kind of broke up the Chauncey Billups Piston team, and ended their run there, and the Cavs got to the finals, and LeBron took some other horrible teams to the finals in 2015 after Kyrie and Love got hurt, and then in 2018 in general. That Bengals team in 2020 was certainly not awful. Certainly, I would not put it to the level of some of those bad Cavs teams. But this man has beaten Josh Allen in a playoff game. He's beaten Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game. I mean, this guy has stared down the biggest and baddest. He's never faced Lamar in a playoff game, but we know Lamar's history. I think I'm going to roll with Joe Burrow in that spot. This guy stared down the biggest and baddest in the game with a bad offensive line, a bad defense, or at least a questionable defense in 2021. A coach none of us are really crazy about. And an owner that doesn't spend much money at all, and he's been like, okay, that's not going to need help. Okay, I'll just do what I got to do. I'm going to be accurate as whiz. I'm going to be the most, in terms of completion percentage, Joe Burrow, the most accurate quarterback in NFL history, highest completion percentage ever. I think it's like 68.8 or something like that. Deadly accurate. By the way, the whole thing with Burrow, like we know Mahomes moves well. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson move really well. They run more than Mahomes. Mahomes is more effective with his runs. Burrow doesn't run. Burrow's moving really well. Like, he looks as healthy as ever. So it is, I think it's one of the most embarrassing seasons for a team in history in terms of having a great franchise quarterback that what we're seeing from Cincinnati. Joe might be the MVP of the league. Actually, I think he would be the MVP of the league if Cincinnati were 11-5 today. Heck, 10-6, and they'd be in the playoffs. They'd be one of the most dangerous teams because of Joe. Now, a lot has to go Cincinnati's way. They have to beat Pittsburgh, my Steelers on Saturday. Don't rule out my Steelers. Don't rule out Mike Tomlin on long rest. You certainly don't rule out Mike Tomlin's a 3-point home dog. That is easy money historically for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. But you got to beat Pittsburgh. Then you got to hope that the Broncos lose to the backup Chiefs at home with the playoffs on the line. And you got to hope that the Miami Dolphins somehow lose to the New York Jets. Plausible, probably not very likely. But if Cincinnati gets in, I mean, I still don't think they're a contender. But again, there's a little bit of an Andrew Luck vibe where some of those Colts teams were simply not good. Now, those Colts teams didn't have Jamar Chase. They didn't have that. But coach Chuck Pagano, Zach Taylor, defense not very good. O-line, that Colts O-line was way worse than this O-line with Cincinnati. I'm telling you what we're seeing from Joe Burrow is simply remarkable. It's simply remarkable. My man John Rivera in the comments, Fan Perspective Podcast. Shout out to him. Please go subscribe to his pod. Let's go Yankees. You really are a Yankees fan, John. After the offseason y'all have had, signing a bunch of old guys and missing out on Soto, getting passed over for the other New York team. It's okay. John's a good friend of mine. We banter about this. I probably agree with you, John. He says Higgins is going to New England. I mean, the Patriots got, I think, the most cap space in the league. God knows they need receivers. So probably, I mean, the fact that the Bengals won't even, they haven't paid Chase yet. You tell me they're going to pay Higgins and Chase? It's ridiculous. It really, really is. I mean, I'd love to see T. Higgins in Pittsburgh. He's certainly more emotionally dependable than George Pickens, but there's no way on earth that the Bengals, although he'd be a free agent, so the Steelers could go recruit him. That'd be a good get for Omar Khan, and we need another wide receiver. No question about that. But enough Steelers talk. John may not like this. Let's talk about the Jets. So, folks that I was just hating on the Jets. I was a Jets hater when I picked them to finish 7-10. That would have been generous. Okay, the Jets lost by a final score of 40-14 against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo to fall to a record of 4-12. And Aaron Rodgers had one of the worst quarterback performances of this NFL season. We can show you his numbers. He was nothing short of dreadful. 12 of 18, $112 passing, no touchdowns, 2 brutal interceptions, a passer rating of 44, and a QBR 0 to 100. I'm not kidding when I say this. 1.3. Those looking at this graphic, that is the lowest NFL QBR since 2021, since Davis Mills, ironically, against the Buffalo Bills back in 2021, and the third lowest recorded QBR ever did Aaron Rodgers put up yesterday for the Jets. So the Jets have their fair share of problems. That's putting it mildly. The owner is terrible. The coaching staff was questionable to begin with, and then they went on to fire the best coach in their staff, Robert Saleh. The O-line's not very good. The defense is hit or miss, which I said they would be coming into the season. Garrett Wilson's really talented. I don't know if I want him to be the best receiver on a bad team. Breece Hall was highly overvalued coming into the season, and they just so happened to play in a division with Josh Allen. They had no chance to win this division. They were nothing close to a contender. But with all the problems with the Jets that they have institutionally, and I'm not sure any of them are that fixable as long as Woody Johnson's in the building. Aaron Rodgers did choose this franchise. Aaron Rodgers did leave Matt LaFleur in, as I've brought up many times this season, including on this show today in our first segment. The most talented young group of wide receivers of the National Football League. Oh, by the way, a culture in Green Bay that is perpetually excellent with great coaches, no owner, but GM rarely misses on, draft picks and free agents, and the Packers are always well run. The Jets never are, and yet he chose the Jets because he could have more control, bring his buddies in, and see if he could deliver a championship, i.e. in his old age, i.e. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Of course, that is not going to happen. What I'm about to say, I actually, for the sake of my show, hope doesn't happen, because it will be content that we will miss out on. And if nothing else, I like good content. Aaron Rodgers needs to retire. Like, it's over. And this doesn't take away from anything in Aaron's legacy. He's undoubtedly one of the 10 greatest players to play his position in the history of the National Football League. He will get in on the first ballot in the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio someday without a shadow of a doubt. And after Patrick Mahomes, I think he's the most gifted quarterback that's ever played the game. The release, the footwork was never good, but it really, in Aaron's prime, it didn't really have to be. The movement, the arm strength, the arm angles, the accuracy, the efficiency, not turning the football over, like the guy had it all physically. but also, and you're seeing this really bleed in now, that the skills have diminished, the ability has diminished at age 41 years old in year 20, that, yeah, he's also really, 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 really difficult and a massive distraction for any franchise that decides to employ him. Ask Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, Mike McCarthy, any executive or coach that ran the Green Bay Packers, and they'll tell you about that. They'll tell you the same thing in the Jets with Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, really anybody except Nat Hackett, who was objectively the worst offensive play caller in the National Football League, who Aaron Rodgers brought to the Jets to call plays, and he was demoted not even 2 months into the season. It has gotten to a point with this particular player, and I've been on this for a few years now. On his priority list, I don't know where football is. Because Aaron Rodgers is not married, does not have kids, so family is not in the picture, and I'm not judging Aaron, to each his own. That's not judging him for that. But that's not a priority of his. Okay, business, got no qualms if Aaron wants to focus on his endorsements or off the field stuff, no problem. But somewhere in between, remember he had the stint about 3 years ago. This was toward the end of his time in Green Bay, when he was flirting with the idea of hosting Jeopardy. This was after the late great Alex Trebek had passed away, and Jeopardy was looking for a new host. Remember, Aaron guest host for a week was actually pretty good. Aaron was a good guest co-host. He was solid for the show, and actually was like, hey, I'd like to do it, tape in the off season and play football during the season. That was the first inkling that, okay, football might not be the first and foremost thing on his professional priority list. Then he's talking about the fact that this offseason he was publicly courted by a presidential candidate, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., about being his running mate. And Aaron was said to be one of the finalists for that particular title. So Aaron would have been doing the VP debate with J.D. Vance and Tim Walz during the season in week, whatever that would have been, 6, 7. Would that have been good for team morale? He also decided in January, lecturing us, the Jets media, Jets players, all of it, the NFL media. And I quote, all the BS that has nothing to do with winning needs to get out of the building. And of course, mandatory minicamp rolls around in June. Guess who's nowhere to be found? It's Aaron Rodgers. We could talk about the dysfunction that happens with the Jets for now. This is 14 years in a row. They missed the playoffs, and it's going to continue after Aaron's done playing for the franchise. But he chose that. Like he was not traded here. He was not drafted here. This was not anything that was out of his control. People that are trying to absolve Aaron of blame, he chose to come here and set the expectation of a Super Bowl. He said explicitly that Super Bowl III trophy that old Broadway Joe Namath won back in '69, that's a lonely trophy. We want to add another one to the trophy case before I get out of here, before I retire from the NFL. He set the expectation, not the media, not the fans, not me, not Aaron said it. In that opening press conference in the spring of 2023. Suffered the Achilles injury. I don't think they were contender that year, but he never got the chance to prove it, given the benefit of the doubt. But at 40, going on 41, off an Achilles, hasn't been elite in 3 years, hasn't won a playoff game in 4. You're telling me with a bad O-line, bad play calling, bad coaching staff, questionable defense, questionable talent in the same division as Josh Allen, that was poof, gonna change in an instant. It was delusional from the start. And by the way, I don't even blame Jets fans for wanting to believe in it. What do they have to believe in? The team has sucked for years. They have one inkling of hope. I don't blame them for buying into it. I do blame the national media for buying into it. I do blame Vegas and odds makers for setting this fraudulent mess as the favorite to win the AFC East. I blame a website I respect immensely, Pro Football Focus, for stating this offseason that the New York Jets had the 4th most talented roster in football. For them to win exactly as many games this season, because they're probably going to lose to Miami on Sunday. And Aaron bears no culpability from that. Take a play yesterday. We weren't able to get the footage, but it's on social media. Early in the game, this is the Jets' second. Was it their second drive of the game? No, it was their first drive of the game. Get the ball all the way down to the Buffalo Bills 24. So Bills have scored a touchdown. The Jets are putting together a good drive. It's like, okay, it's a nice few plays. I think Todd Downing's there. See, okay, a nice little bag of tricks. Aaron's moving well. He's accurate. Okay, we're running the football. Get it down at 3rd down and 1 from the Buffalo Bills 24-yard line. Aaron goes play action. He's got a kid, Yaboa, I believe is his name, wide open. Dirts it, throws it at the kid's feet, proceeds to yell at him. That's Aaron Rodgers. Immensely talented. He's a 4-time MVP for a reason. Absolutely. Super Bowl champion 2010. He finally had one great playoff run and a string of really bad ones. But when you're in the foxhole, when you're in the trenches, that's the last guy you want with you. He'll bail on you in an instant. And that's the guy with the Jets looking for a new head coach that they want to keep around. Ian Rappaport reported yesterday that Garrett Wilson is going to want out of the franchise. You know, the most talented player on your team is going to want out of the franchise if Aaron Rodgers wants to come back. Because the mind of Garrett Wilson, he's like, man, I was out here balling. You're like, hey, let's bring in my buddy Devontae Adams, just like I brought in my buddy Alan Lazard, just like I brought in my buddy Randall Cobb, just like I brought in my buddy Nat Hackett. All have bombed. All have not worked. Why the heck should I want to be around this mess? I mean, there was folks going after McCole Hardman last year, and McCole Hardman, caught the game-winning pass in the Super Bowl. So I think, listen, that nothing that happens this year or what potentially could happen in the future if Aaron decides to stay, which, by the way, is good for my show because Aaron is great content. Nothing that will happen today that has happened or will happen moving forward will change the fact that Aaron's one of the 10 best to ever do it. The second, in my view, the second most talented quarterback to ever play the position, a 4-time MVP, and a no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer. None of what will happen will change that. But it does all but confirm that when Aaron is stripped, some of Aaron's superpowers, so to speak, superstar abilities of that position are stripped away, one of the worst leaders that's ever played in the National Football League by a long shot. And the Jets, as dysfunctional as they are, would be out of their minds to bring him back. And any other organization, like, why would the Raiders bring him back? Well, or bring him in, rather. You either draft a quarterback or Aiden O'Connell's serviceable enough to get us a high pick, and we'll draft somebody else in 2026. What's the benefit of bringing Aaron in? So I think it is an end to what was a remarkable career that needs to end because he doesn't have it even close to it anymore. There's no market for him. Just hang it up now. Don't make it even worse. So Aaron Rodgers, you left the Green Bay Packers to go to the New York Jets. Bad call, dude. You done messed up, Aaron. Bad. Real bad. Check the comments. John Rivera, most disappointing season ever as a Jets fan. Yeah, and again, by the way, I will say, not to pat myself on the back, I actually called this not 4-13, certainly, because if the Jets lose, they'll be 4-13. I literally said, I may have to dig up the clip before the season's over. Back last December, a year ago, when the Jets lost to the Browns, that was Joe Flacco. It was a Thursday night game. Joe Flacco played well. And I literally the next day came on my show and said, if Jets fans think this season disappointing or heartbreaking, certainly with the injury to Aaron and then Zach Wilson, it was a mess. If I think this was bad, next year's going to be worse because the expectations are going to be higher and Aaron's going to be worse. And I don't think I'm exactly Nostradamus. I'm just, my thing was, what does everybody see that I'm not seeing? The roster has talent. Is it a talented roster? No. Is it a good coaching staff? Absolutely not. Do we like the owner? Not at all. Do we trust the GM? And Aaron was not going to magically turn back the hands of time. Father Time gets everybody. Eventually got Brady at the end. Patrick. Yeah, there you go. You done messed up, Ron. Let's see. Patrick. Vice President debates vaccine status. Flexing and smirking on McAfee with Tay Adams. Excuse after excuse. Weather, wide receiver, sports media talking bad about him. And it got away from us is the newest line. Who wants to deal with ayahuasca, the philosopher Rodgers? I'll wait. Where are the apologists? We shall see. Again, nothing Aaron has done this season to take away from his remarkable on-field legacy. It's not. But I mean, he's not very good anymore. Can we finally admit that? And can we admit that the Jets have a lot of faults? He's one of them, and he chose that. He didn't get traded here. He wasn't drafted. This wasn't like, Joe Burrow drafted by the Bengals, and it's like, we get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins right, but we're not sure about the coach and the roster after that. Wasn't drafted here. I mean, come on. Well, this is I feel like in some ways we kind of lost the plot on Aaron Rodgers. Before we go to break, let's go to our week 17. Week 17. I don't know why I said 15. Week 17 NFL recap. So I didn't get a chance to talk about, because I did a show on Thursday with NFL predictions reacting to the Christmas games. So we talked about the Christmas games. Didn't get a chance to react to Seahawks Bears. What does there react to? It was the worst game of the year, 6-3 Seattle. The game meant nothing for the Seahawks because they needed the Rams to lose. They didn't. So Seattle's done. They're out of the playoff picture. As for Chicago, rough performance from Caleb Williams in the offense again. This offseason going to be the most important coaching decision in the history of the Chicago Bears franchise. Because I think the choice is clear. If you want culture, you go Vrabel. If you want to really develop Caleb Williams, again, without the assurance that the culture is going to be changed, but you do have assurance, Caleb's going to be the guy and get the best out of him, and got to rebuild the O-line too, it's Ben Johnson. It is those guys are bust. If they get anybody other than that, I think the Bears are going to continue to be what they've been for a while, and that's dysfunctional, poorly run, and wasting quarterback talent, which I think in the case of Caleb is one of the most talented guys we've ever seen out of college. That's my only takeaway there. For Caleb's sake, I hope they get the coach right. Speaking of young quarterbacks getting the shaft, Chargers hammering the Patriots 40-7. Justin Herbert was great. 3 touchdowns and a pass rating of 116. Chargers clinch a playoff spot. I had them. My bold prediction was Chargers in the AFC title game. Don't think that's going to come around because I just don't think they have quite enough offensively. Ladd McConkey's really good and they run the football well. And good Lord, do they have 2 amazing tackles. Just they don't have quite enough firepower. And again, I'm a Justin Herbert guy. I said before the 2020 draft, he was the best guy on the board, I thought. That ended up being Burrow, but I would think Herbert is absolutely right behind Joe from that 2020 class at the quarterback position. He does need to win a playoff game. Like we're 5 years in, Trevor. Justin Herbert needs to win a playoff game. So keep that in mind. But Jim Harbaugh, it just continues. The pattern continues. Wins instantly at San Diego State, wins instantly at Stanford, wins instantly with the 49ers, wins instantly with Michigan, and wins instantly with the Los Angeles Chargers. He has taken a defense that was the worst in football and turned it into the best in football. I mean, like I said, blind draft. You say, we're going to draft coaches, but I'm not going to tell you whether your coach that you draft is going to be college or NFL. Jim Harbaugh is the runaway first pick. Runaway. I mean, he's the modern day Jimmy Johnson in some ways. Like, awesome in college, national champion, awesome in the NFL. Now, Jimmy won 2 Super Bowls. We're going to see if Jim's able to do that, but I think he is the best. Take Andy Reid out of it because Andy Reid's in a class of his own. Harbaugh's the best football coach that we have. He works he works literally everywhere. He really does. As for the Patriots, though, Drake May didn't have a great day at the office. A passer rate of 84. It wasn't terrible. Got hurt. Brissett came in briefly. May came back in. Patriots fans booed the team off the field. So, obviously, I want Gerard Mayo work because I'm a Tennessee fan, and Gerard Mayo is a Vol for life. Go Vols. We knew the Patriots were going to be one of the worst teams in football. We knew it was probably the worst roster in the NFL. Like, they have some – right now, they have the first pick. Well, first of all, let's see if they hang on to it because the Patriots played the Bills, who are going to sit all their guys in all likelihood, so the Patriots very well could win that game. They almost beat the healthy Bills last week. If I'm New England, look, Travis Hunter, it might be a generational talent. I'd trade down because Drake May's the guy. You've got your quarterback. I think the Patriots need to be in the business of acquiring as many picks as humanly possible. We got to fix the O-line first and foremost. We got to get some good weapons on the outside. Defensively, that's kind of ingrained in the culture of New England. Like, I always believe in the Patriots. They have been great defensively this year, but at some point to field a good defense. But they are, they're I think the Oregon Ducks could put up a fight with the Patriots. I honest to God do. Like, this team is talentless. And so I think the best course of action would be to trade down. As for Draw May, I'm pulling for him. But the press conferences have been clunky. The team looks disorganized. It's just not as bad as Belichick was at the end. This is certainly worse. And the game passed Bill by. And by the way, in the case of Mayo, in his defense, he hasn't coached very long. He really has. He's been the Patriots assistant for some time, but you talk about some of the guys that have gone for. And by the way, I'm fine with former players getting a extra step. Zach Orr who's a defensive coordinator in Baltimore, former player, moved up the ranks quickly. Got no problem with that because he played the game. But I think it'd be good for Jerome Mayo to go somewhere else. Maybe Pittsburgh. I don't know. Maybe that'd be a good spot for him. Like, go as a defensive coach, maybe a linebackers coach, and kind of work his way up the system, get a second chance down the road. Because I think he's a guy of high character. I think he's a good leader, but just not quite ready to be a head coach. I'd love to see him get an opportunity down the road. Reports are they're going to keep him, so we'll see. Talked about Bengals Broncos already. Rams Cardinals. Not a terribly entertaining game to be a 4-point decided by 4 points. Kyler throws the interception at the end. I swear to God, with this Rams team, it's. They're the scariest team in the NFC because they've won a Super Bowl before. Puka's awesome. Cooper Kupp can be situationally good. And Stafford and McVay are, you don't want to face those guys in a do-or-die game, especially in LA, in which they will get a home game in a couple of weeks in the wild card round. But man, they have the last 3 weeks. I mean, they put up 12 on San Francisco and no touchdowns. They put up 19 on the Jets defense. And then they put up 13 against the Arizona Cardinals, who had finished just giving up 30 to Carolina. This offense is sputtering a little bit. Like, I think if there's any team, the Rams play Seattle this week. They're probably going to rest their guys as they should. If there's any team that Stafford needs a week off, the team needs a week off, we need to recalibrate. It's the Rams. I believe the stat is true. I saw this, that the LA Rams are the first team in NFL history to be under 500 in the bye week back-to-back years and make the playoffs both years. And that's a credit to McVay. It's a credit to Stafford. There's still some holes in this roster. I had them as an NFC title game team before the season. Maybe. I doubt. I just don't think they had the. I mean, I know they beat the Vikings before the season, but they have to go to Minnesota. Detroit's better. Philly's better. I just don't think they can win more than one playoff game at this point in time. So as for yesterday, Jags beat the Titans. Mac Jones beat Mason Rudolph. Didn't see that coming, but Jacksonville wins. Mac Jones had a passer rating of 122. So, hey, even backups can have good days. Even some of the worst quarterbacks. Even Will Levis at one point this season had some good performances. Mac Jones is no different. He's terrible. Buccaneers hammer the Panthers. This is my favorite, if I were a Batman game of the week last week, because Carolina probably should have beaten Tampa the first matchup in Charlotte. They were 8-point dogs. The Bucs had just lost a rough game to Dallas. Carolina's playing well. Bryce Young, and by the way, Bryce Young's stats, 2 touchdowns. Okay, no turnovers. No turnovers for Bryce, a passer rate of 100. Bryce was fine. It's just the Panthers couldn't run the football at all, and that's the lifeblood of their offense that they were missing my man Hubbard for this game, so that was a devastating loss for them. Baker, touchdown maker. 5 touchdown passes, no interceptions, a passer rating of 153. And all of a sudden, thanks to the Falcons' loss now, Tampa's in control for the division, beat the Saints next week. Buccaneers, for the 4th consecutive year, win the NFC South. 2 titles with Brady in the division. And by the way, the year before that, won the Super Bowl, obviously, with Tom. And then back-to-back years with Baker Mayfield, they would win the NFC South once again. Raiders beat the Saints. Only major storyline from this game is that Brock Bowers broke the season, the single-season rookie record for most receiving yards by a rookie tight end, and then broke the record, I believe, for single-season catches by any rookie, did Brock Bowers. So you talk about a guy who has just been money. I think it's the rookie of the year. I would give him the edge over Jaden Daniels, as great as Jaden has been. Jaden's probably going to win, which I have no problem with whatsoever. But keep in mind what Bowers is working with. These aren't exactly special quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder. I mean, this isn't exactly... Remember that Patriots QB room in 2016 where it was Brady, Garoppolo, and Brissett, and it was a pretty strong room? That would not be it. But the Raiders have won back-to-back games, killed their draft position, but Bowers broke some records. So shout out to the young man for that. Philadelphia blowing out Dallas. No shock here, 41-7. The Cooper Rush over Dak crowd is awful quiet today. But Kenny Pickett, former Steeler, with a odd game. He had a passer rate of 119, but he had the weird the flip incompletion. But Saquon Barkley, I want to talk about this for a second. So the main story is Saquon Barkley is 101 yards away from breaking the great Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record. And what a lot of folks are saying, there's two components. A, Philadelphia's locked up the NFC East, and they've locked up the 2 seed. So next week's game against the Giants means nothing to them. They can rest their guys, get a bye week, go into their playoff game 2 weeks from now. The problem, though, for Philly is Saquon. It's not like Saquon's 300 yards away from the record. He's 101 yards away, which is a lot, but more than doable for Saquon to break the single-season rushing record that Eric Dickerson has held since 1984. So on the conversation as to whether he should get it or go get it. I think he should. And for those that are saying, yeah, but he played an extra game. You know, he played 17, Eric Dickerson played 16. Yeah, on the raw just games, yeah. But anybody that's going to try and put any sort of asterisk next to this are just not looking at the numbers. Let's go and put up this stat right here. So Eric Dickerson had 2,105 rushing yards in 1984, 16 games, okay? Saquon Barkley, 2,005 rushing yards in 16 games. Saquon's going to play, potentially, another game. Look at the carries. So Dickerson is exactly 100 yards ahead of Saquon Barkley in all-time rushing yards in a single season with 34 more carries. And so now, unless it takes Saquon 34 carries, which I do not think Philadelphia's going to run him 34 times next Sunday, that would be foolish. Don't have Saquon beat up and with you know, when he could have fresher legs going to the playoff game. But Saquon, as long as it doesn't take him 34 to get to 100, which I don't think it will, yeah, he'll be the more than rightful single-season rush record holder. So I would let him go for it, especially under that pretense. Now, I don't know if Philadelphia cares that much about this, but anybody's being like, oh, yeah, got an extra game. Yes, but he's got way less carries than Dickerson. So you got to factor that in the equation as well. Same when, if he does break it in when trying to poo-poo it, first of all, bet you're fun at parties. Two, don't, you know, he'll have more than earned it, by the way, with less of a workload. So that does matter. So, and by the way, doing so in a league today that is more pass happy than ever. Now, Philly might not be, but the NFL today is. And so that would be it'd be a win for Saquon. It'd be a win for the Eagles. It'd be a win for running backs in general. I mean, I remember just a couple offseasons ago, we're talking about, man, not as the running back position dying. It's not exactly the fullback, but it was very much the value of the position is kind of deteriorating. Not this year. It's been the year of the running back. But not just because Saquon's been great. Derrick Henry's been great. Josh Jacobs, Chris McCaffrey, I think, still can be great. And others, ladies and gentlemen, look at the NFL draft. Is this as stacked of a running back draft headed by Ashton Genty as we've seen? A lot of running backs go in the first 2 to 3 rounds in April. So it'd be a win for running backs. It'd be a good kind of cap for Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'd let him go for it. And if he does get it, people saying, oh, he got an extra game. Yes, with less attempts. Took him less attempts to get to that number than it took the great Eric Dickerson, who played more. Not to take credit from Eric Dickerson, who's a freaking legend, but he did play in a more rush-happy era. So all those things in consideration. What's the next game? Giants. Giants ending the Colts' playoff hopes 45-33 and ending the Giants' hopes as well, likely, of getting the number one pick in this upcoming NFL draft. Drew Lock. How about these numbers from Drew Lock? 17 of 23, 309 passing, 4 tuds, no picks. QBR 0 to 100 of 97 and a pass rating of 155. But Malik freaking Neighbors was the story of the day. 7 catches, $171, 2 touchdowns in the game, including a 56-yard bomb, or 59-yard bomb, rather, that really put the game away for New York. Listen, I don't know how good the win was for the future of the Giants. It'd be nice to have Shedeur Sanders, who I really like, don't love, but really like as a prospect. But he's certainly, you'd have to imagine, a better long-term option than Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito. So, as for the Colts, this is why I didn't have them in the playoffs before the season, because I didn't trust their defense, and I didn't trust whoever they had at quarterback. Old man Joe Flacco is fine. I mean, they did score 33 points yesterday, but he's been in the league for almost 20 years. Obviously, his best days are behind him, and Anthony Richardson is just not a natural thrower of the football. So, as weak of a quarterback draft as this is, and because of the fact that this was Anthony Richardson's first full season with the Colts, he's earned the right to continue next year as their starter and then give him another year. But if this continues, you gotta move quarterbacks, because I think Steichen's great. Steichen needs to find a good defensive coordinator, and they need to improve on that side of the ball in terms of personnel. Really go heavy on that in the draft, because Indy's offense is really talented. Could probably use some extra help, maybe another slot receiver, something like that. But the Colts are fine. Offensively, they need to upgrade defensively, and they really need to upgrade at quarterback. Dolphins beat the Browns 20-3. Browns are openly tanking at this point. Miami keeps their playoff hopes alive. Hey, if Denver loses to Kansas City, Miami wins, Dolphins are in the playoffs, and probably. So there you go for Miami. Already talking about the Vikings, the Packers, and talking about the Commanders and Falcons. Last thing on that game, then we'll go to break and then go into some predictions for future NFL games. This kid, Michael Penix Jr., I know his stat line isn't great, 71 passer rating, 40 QBR. What I saw from that young man, and I said I thought Caleb was the best prospect out of the draft this past go-around, and I had Michael Penix Jr. number 2. The poise in the pocket, the arm strength, the accuracy. That kid did not flinch on the drive that tied the game for the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, you got a 4th down and long. A couple plays after disastrous wildcat play. Snap goes over Bijan Robinson's head. Now it looks like the Falcons are going to lose. And this young man steps up and doesn't hesitate. Bam, a dart to Kyle Pitts. After, by the way, a previous 4th down conversion to Drake London. Massive throw to Kyle Pitts, ties the game. Ends up, there was a botched clock by Atlanta. Commanders win in overtime, but short-term loss, long-term gain. Like, the Falcons may not make the playoffs. Who cares? Who cares? You've got the guy. Limited time, but we saw some flash against the Giants. That was a big-time moment for Michael Penix Jr. They lost the game. Lost the battle, may have won the war. So the Falcons next week, and then they got Carolina. Sneaky. Again, the Panthers, Bryce Young, if they get Chuba Hubbard back, they could win that game, potentially. Atlanta's still alive for the division, but they need the Buccaneers to lose to the Saints, and they need to beat the Panthers. But even if they don't make it, Penix is the guy. Like, you've got your quarterback. And there's something you could build on going into what will really be, in effect, his rookie season in 2025. So last take on that game. All right, take another quick break. Be back in 1 minute to predict the Lions and the 49ers, as well as the semifinal in the College Football Playoff. And boy, do we have some good matchups. Get in that 1 minute on Carving Up Live. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. So we have a game tonight. I hate to say this, but the game means really nothing in the scheme of things, at least in terms of the playoff picture between the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. Get the background music going on. It is a rematch of the NFC title game from this past January as we get ready to predict this one. So in San Francisco, the Detroit Lions are going there. And right now, as we see here today, they are, if we could pull this up, a 3.5-point road favorite in San Francisco. So here's the only fascinating aspect of this game, because Detroit, even if they lose, if they beat Minnesota on Sunday Night Football, they win the NFC North, they get the top seed in the conference, and that is, honest to God, one of the greatest regular season games, one of the biggest regular season games in terms of the records of the teams, in terms of the one seed on the line, division on the line, that we've seen in the history of the NFL. Cannot wait for that one next Sunday night. A little tune-up for Detroit on a short week right now this will be a short week coming up against the Vikings. This week against San Francisco. So a lot of inactives. Dre Greenlaw, a bunch of guys are out for the 49ers. According to Dan Campbell, all the lines are playing. Jared Goff's playing. Jahmyr Gibbs is playing. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Laporta, Penei Sewell, the defensive guys, they're playing. And so, is it Dan Campbell being reckless? A little. It's the one reason that, well, I think Detroit probably has the best roster when healthy in the NFL. I just don't trust them if they were to get to the Super Bowl against the likes of Andy Reid and Mahomes. I just don't trust Campbell, much as I love him. The 4th down calls, that's one thing. But in this spot, like, this would be a nice bye week for your guys before the massive game season, potentially altering game next week against Minnesota. Go ahead and sit your guys. But if we've learned one thing about Dan Campbell, one of the biggest wins that turned around this Detroit Lions franchise, I'll never forget as long as I live, it's when I bought stock into Detroit long-term, and I've been a Lions supporter ever since. Week 18 in Green Bay, Wisconsin against the Packers. I've told the story a million times, but it kind of applies here. The Detroit Lions go into that day needing a Seattle Seahawks loss and a win for themselves against the Packers. They're in the playoffs. They play Sunday night in Green Bay. Seattle wins in overtime a half hour before Detroit kicks off in Green Bay. So 30 minutes prior to kickoff, the Lions know, regardless, their season's over. The Packers have everything to play for. They win, they're in. And Detroit beats Green Bay in what ended up being Aaron Rodgers' final start as a Packer. And I was like, wow, like that shows me the focus, the culture, and determination of this franchise. They got smart OC Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, the DC, and Dan Campbell riling up the troops, getting ready to go each and every week. I like what they're building. Picked them to go to the NFC title game before last year. Got that right in the money. Picked them to go to the Super Bowl this year, and I still feel great about that. This is what Dan Campbell does. The Lions are going to come out with their hair on fire. The Niners know their season is over. Their body language says it. Give me the Detroit Lions minus 3.5 and to win convincingly 35-17 against the San Francisco 49ers. Lions 35, Niners 17. If they were resting their guys, and I got to see my man Hendon Hooker, who still don't discount. We could see Hendo Cinco tonight. I'd still pick Detroit, but it wouldn't be a blowout fashion. But this is who Dan Campbell is. Is it reckless? Probably. But it's who he is. It's who the Lions are. They're tapping into it. In some ways, you got to respect it. Shifting now, though. Because that game, in the scheme of things, doesn't mean a whole lot. The big games come up starting in Week 18. We got the College Football Playoff, baby. Now, we had 4 blowouts. 4 duds in the first round. But the matchups we got in the semifinal. Quarterfinal, rather. I apologize. The quarterfinal of the College Football Playoff are sensational. So, it is playoff time in college football. Get the playoff music going. Here we go. We will start tomorrow night at the Verbo Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. The Penn State Nittany Lions, number 6 in the country. The Boise State Broncos, the 3 seed in the country. Penn State, big favorite, double digits, minus 11. So here's what I'm looking at, because there's been a lot of controversy about the winning a conference championship, top 4 conference champions get an automatic bye because of the fact that Boise State won the Mountain West, 3rd highest ranked conference champion. They're the 3 seed automatic bye. What I would tell folks is this. They beat UNLV twice. UNLV's a good football team in the Mountain West. And outside of Ohio State, nobody put a bigger scare into Oregon than Boise State did. They lost that game by 3 points. Oregon, undefeated, number 1, national championship prediction, at least on my part, in the case of many. Boise State lost by 3 points to Oregon, at Oregon, by the way. Ashton Jeanty, pissed off. He's had a few weeks to stew over the fact, I should have been the Heisman winner over Travis Hunter. This is ridiculous. I should have won over that guy. Just thinking about it. And he's ready to take it out on the Nittany Lions, who, by the way, took care of business against SMU last week at Penn State, 38-10. And by the way, the score somehow, some way was actually, the game was actually more lopsided than even the score. 38-10 might indicate at Penn State, one of the loudest stadiums in college football. I think 11 is too many points. I think Boise State plus 11 is the play here because of Ashton Jeanty, because the fact that Boise State has played the big dogs and competed really well with the big dogs in college football this season. They've got to bye, time to prepare. I'm going Penn State. They're the more talented roster, and James Franklin really needs this W. 31-24, Penn State wins this one, but Boise State plus 11 is the way to go here. 11 is too many points. Ashton Jeanty's going to do this thing. This Broncos offense is really, really good. Penn State 31, Boise State 24, Boise State plus 11. Penn State, who inexplicably, and this is the main thing they got to change next year in the playoff, way too easier of a path to the Natty than Oregon. Number 1 Oregon, that's got to change. But Penn State punches their ticket to the College Football Playoff Semifinal. New Year's Day 2025, the first college football game will be played between the Texas Longhorns and Arizona State. So Texas in this game favored minus 13. By the way, Texas is ranked 5th, seeded 5th. Arizona State is seeded 4th. Obviously, Arizona State with a first-round bye. So this kid Scatabo, unbelievable. Cam Scatabo, second best running back probably in college football. 19 touchdowns, averages 6 yards a clip. Had over 1,500 rushing yards this season for Arizona State. But I think Texas, top to bottom, may have the most talented roster in college football. The main concern I have is Quinn Ewers. I don't love him as an NFL prospect. I think he is the biggest reason, absolutely, that Texas did not get a first-round bye and had to play in the first round and lost to Georgia because of the inaccuracy by Quinn Ewers. But I still think the wide receivers of this team just stacked. Running game is great. Defense is stacked, particularly up front. Might have one of the best defensive lines in the country. You know, I love Steve Sarkisian, one of the smartest offensive minds. Great culture builder. Give me Texas, minus 13, 38-20. Listen, Arizona State's going to compete. I love Cam Scatabo. Texas is going to win this one convincingly in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, 38-20, and they will punch their ticket to the College Football Playoff Semifinal. Now, the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. And boy, does it not get much better than this. Now, I will say for the record, would have liked to see my Tennessee Volunteers in this game. I really would have. But alas, we fell to the better team. It is the 8th-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes and the 1-seeded, my national championship pick before the season started, the Oregon Ducks. Despite being the number 1 seed, Oregon is a dog in this game. Neutral site, West Coast, Oregon's a West Coast team. A 2.5-point underdog, which is minuscule in college football, at least compared to the NFL, where 2.5 is certainly greater. Ohio State's a 2.5-point favorite in the Rose Bowl against an Oregon team that they actually lost to at Autzen earlier this season in October. So listen, I have my questions about Dylan Gabriel as an NFL prospect. I do. But as a college quarterback with Dan Lanning, he's great. Okay, this running game has been excellent for Oregon all season long. Jordan James and company. You got the kid Johnson, the wide receiver. Tez Johnson, one more talented receivers in college football this season. Ohio State has some of the best wide receivers in the country, without question. I still don't trust Will Howard. We saw the slide at the end of that game last time against Oregon. Cost Ohio State, the rest of the clock. They ended up losing the game by a point. Could have wanted a field goal. If you just compared roster to roster, Ohio State is probably just a little bit better than Oregon. But if there's one thing that stands out, Oregon, from what I've seen, is the fastest team in the country. Penn State is, we know how talented they are. We know how successful year they've had. I think they're going to beat Boise State and go to the Final Four in the College Football Playoff. With that said, speed on speed wasn't close. The game was close, but in terms of speed, Penn State's stacked defense could not stop Oregon. On the edges is where on the perimeters really got Penn State. I think they have the athletes to be able to do that against Ohio State. I know that Ohio State's got some talented guys in the back end of their defense. I'm going to go Oregon in this game. My national championship pick before the season. Close once again, 34-31. I got walk-off field goal. Oregon wins this game 34-31. Take the Ducks plus 2.5. Take the Oregon in the points and the money line to win outright 34-31. Somehow, some way, the number 1 team in the country, the number 1 seed, undefeated, is a dog in their first game. Oregon wins, gets to the Final Four of the College Football Playoff Semifinal by a final score over Ohio State. They've thrown the Buckeyes once again, 34-31. Fascinating game here. All right, fascinating game here in the All-State Sugar Bowl. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the 7 seed. The Georgia Bulldogs, the 2 seed. So Georgia's a 1-point favorite in this game. So, look, Notre Dame's schedule hasn't been that great. If you want to look up and down Notre Dame's schedule, you want to say their best win is prior to the playoff, obviously, Army, I guess, Texas A&M, maybe. Not great, but they took care of business. They did what they were supposed to. They had the early season slip up against Northern Illinois at home. It was a brutal loss. Since then, they've been excellent. Listen, call me crazy. In terms of draft value, if Riley Leonard's available 3rd or 4th round, I think my Steelers should take him. I'm not saying he's going to be a franchise quarterback. I don't know what he is. But I really liked him at Duke. I think now at Notre Dame, he's got a really smart coaching staff. We know the talent Notre Dame has, particularly in the running game. Opportunity for this kid to be successful. As for Georgia, this defense is awesome. Top to bottom, one of the best defenses in college football. Kirby Smart is arguably the best coach in college football. You can make that case with Harbaugh and Saban gone. But the limitations they're going to have at quarterback moving forward, I get it. The kid is easy to root for. And by the way, has the coolest name, Gunnar Stockton. Okay? Quarterback, sophomore, out of Tiger, Georgia. Gutted it out, helped Georgia finish off the SEC title game in Atlanta. I got that. And this game's going to be in the South. That obviously favors the Dogs. I just don't think they have enough playmaking ability out of that position. Listen, I was not a Carson Beck guy. You all know this. I just don't think they're having enough big plays to be able to compete with Notre Dame's big plays. Notre Dame, by the way, is going to try and grind the clock, make this a time of possession game. That's what they want to do. I'm going to go with the very slight upset with the Fighting Irish. Notre Dame beats Georgia 27-20. They advance to the College Football Playoff Semifinal game. 27-20. Notre Dame wins it and advances. They win the Sugar Bowl, getting past Georgia and advancing to the College Football Playoff Semifinal. And let me look at the bracket right now. So that would pit Texas against Oregon. Come on, how good of a game is that? And then that would then pin Penn State against Notre Dame. Solid game there as well. That would be at the Capital One Orange Bowl, and the Goodyear Cotton Bowl would be between the Texas Longhorns and the Oregon Ducks. I believe that's going to be the matchup that we see. So the playoff has been a dud so far, 12-team playoff. I think this is going to be the week where we start to see some real results, some really entertaining television over the course of the next 4 games. Before we get out of here, I did want to pay tribute to 2 legends that we lost over the course of the last few days. First in the world of sports, CBS broadcasting legend Greg Gumbel passed away on Friday at the age of 78. I believe he had cancer, according to his family. He is the first Black commentator to call a Super Bowl, which he did, I believe, a couple of times. I remember in 2003, I was alive. I just wasn't, I didn't remember the game, obviously. But when the Patriots beat the Carolina Panthers, and that was the Brady Belichick second Super Bowl, he called that game. For me, I'm going to remember Greg Gumbel best as the voice of Selection Sunday on when March Madness is starting. You tune into CBS, Greg Gumbel, Clark Kellogg, all the guys there in studio, to break down the matchups and the seeding and all this. He had a great, he's obviously a great broadcaster. Everything that I've heard, I watched obviously a bunch of NFL games yesterday on CBS. Particularly the Bills and Jets game. Jim Nantz, Romo, Tracy Wolfson, they all had glowing things to say. Everything I've heard, they say he was a kind man, people who, or a guy that would give you the time of day. He was a legendary broadcaster, there's no question. He and his brother, obviously Bryant Gumbel, who's been a very successful broadcaster, put it mildly, in his own right. And it says a lot about a person. Tracy Wolfson told a great story yesterday that she entered. Tracy Wolfson, who's now the #1 silent reporter for the NFL on CBS. She was an intern at CBS back in the day, and she worked with Greg Gumbel. And there was a point where I think she led him to the wrong place in the stadium, and she was so embarrassed, oh my God, I just screwed up. This is Greg Gumbel. And she said he was as gracious as could be, was laughing about it, was like, it's no problem. And it says a lot about a person, because it says a lot about a person of high regard in a position of power. I mean, Greg Gumbel, Selection Sunday, called a lot of big games throughout his career. If you treat the intern with the same level of respect as the producer, that says, in this business, that says a lot about your character, and he will certainly be missed. I was very, very sad when I saw the news on Friday, and definitely the loss of a legend. There's no question about that. So rest in peace to the great Greg Gumbel. He was 78 years old. And yesterday, in the world of politics and America in general, we lost a giant. The 39th president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, passed away yesterday at the age of 100 at his home in Plains, Georgia. And he is obviously, as you might guess, the longest lived president in American history. He served from 1977 to 1981. Those that have watched this show for any length of time know that I am almost as obsessed with presidential history as I am with sports. Matter of fact, I've actually studied presidential history longer than I have professional sports. And when one looks at Jimmy Carter's, not just his presidential legacy, but really where he made his mark in the world is his post-presidency with Habitat for Humanity, with the Carter Center. They've monitored 100 elections around the world. Jimmy Carter, if you want to talk about any president in American history, be they in office or post office, that was more pro-human rights. To take one man that has been in that position, Jimmy Carter is, if you had to take a draft, for example, Jimmy Carter is the runaway first overall pick. This is a guy who was deeply sympathetic to the plight of all oppressed peoples all over the globe, be it here in the United States, be it anywhere around any nation around the world. He's the 2002 recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. And, you know, in a sad way, and I'm not breaking news to say that our politics today is really broken in a lot of areas. But in a way, Jimmy Carter was almost too good of a man to be president. Like, to be president of the United States, I do think character is essential to being successful in that role. But at the same time, you do need to be a little bit of a jerk when the time maybe calls for it. That wasn't Jimmy Carter. This is a guy who ran in the 1976 election. This is right off the heels of Watergate, all the corruption in the Nixon administration. Gerald Ford wasn't a popular president because he pardoned Nixon. The previous decade, you'd have the both JFK and RFK assassinated, Dr. King assassinated, Malcolm X. It was Vietnam. It was a really tumultuous 15, 16-year period in the United States of America. And Jimmy Carter, governor of Georgia at the time, ran a campaign, I will not tell a lie to the American people. And it was about as honest as you could possibly imagine for a president. Freed the hostages in Iran at the end of his presidency, American hostages in Iran. And I think what is to me the greatest thing you could say about Jimmy Carter is he served his country. He served his family. He was married to his wife, Rosen, I believe, for 77 years, if my numbers are correct there. Served his country, served his family, served his community. And this, touches me personally as a Christian. And Jimmy Carter was about as devout of a man of faith as you'll ever see, ever. He lived for the Lord about as graciously and lovingly as any human being ever has. And in a country, I don't even want to say in a country, in a political climate where people often use their faith as a weapon or as a crutch or as a way to justify awful behavior. Guy from Plains, Georgia, just so happened to be POTUS for 4 years. He walked the walk every day of his life for 100 years. Didn't mean it was perfect. Didn't mean he didn't have missteps like all of us do. But if there was ever, if I could pick any president in history to be a witness for Christ, and listen, Jimmy Carter was not a perfect president. I mean, he wasn't. The economy wasn't great. There was a number of things that happened during his presidency that, were not great for the country, but that's not his legacy. A lot of folks it is. And by the way, a lot of presidents done immeasurable good for the country. Abraham Lincoln's probably at the top of the list. It's the 43 years of retirement for Mr. Carter that he will and should be remembered by. And again, this touched me personally. I know not everybody watching is a Christian. I respect that. But if there's one thing that Christ teaches in the Bible, love God, love your neighbor. I'm not sure anybody that I've observed, and I never got to meet the man from afar, did that about as well as Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter passed away yesterday at the age of 100. So, somber note to end the show. And Patrick Brown, by the way, in the comments, not to mention Jimmy Carter even taught Sunday school as well. Jimmy Carter taught Sunday school up until literally about the last 3 years of his life, because he entered into hospice care almost 2 years ago. The fact that I remember when he was put on hospice care. Heck, I remember about 10 years ago, he had cancer. It was like, oh, he's like 90 years old. He may not have long to live. He lived another decade. I mean, the guy was just rock solid. And I mean, there's in terms of his character, it's not really a bad thing you could say about the man. And so, yeah, we lost. Listen, Greg Gumbel on Friday, Jimmy Carter on Sunday, two massive losses in the sports community. And in America, in the case of Jimmy Carter, we will desperately miss them both. And the sports world is better for having Greg Gumbel in it. And the country and the world itself is better for having Jimmy Carter in it. We will miss them both. A somber note to end the show, but I wanted to pay as good a tribute as I possibly could to both those individuals because, if nothing else, forget about their accomplishments, what they've done. Both, by all accounts, exceptional human beings. And their impacts will be felt forever. There's no question about that. And with that, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live on either Wednesday or Thursday, probably Thursday, because Wednesday's New Year's. There's a bunch of college football going on. So probably on Thursday, once again, at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on YouTube, or right here on Facebook, rather, as well as the Carving Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Of course, be sure to like, share, comment. Please take 2 seconds every day. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. Helps the channel grow exponentially. And just as importantly, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts. You can find us at the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. And we've got an 8 o'clock spot episode tomorrow night. I'm not going to spoil what's going to go on, but it's going to be a different type of 8 o'clock spot, obviously on the brink of New Year, so that's going to be exciting to talk about all that's going on in the NFL. May talk some college football, may not, we'll see, but we'll have some fun contestants, and it'll be a different show than what it usually is. I'll put it that way. So tune in tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time to the 8 o'clock spot on live on the Grid Network's YouTube channel. Be back for Carving Up Live in the new year, but before that, we'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific for we do it every year, our year-end special in the world of sports, our 2024 year in review in the world of sports. I'll give my top 10 athletes, my top 10 moments in the world of sports. Cannot wait. We'll see you then. We'll see you tomorrow on Carving Up at noon to close out 2024 for the show, and then we'll see you in the 8 o'clock spot to close out the 2024 for the Grid at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. We hope you can make it for both. As for regular run-of-the-mill Carving Up Live shows, that's it for 2024. We'll see you on Thursday in 2025. Again, please tune in for a year in review tomorrow at noon, 8 o'clock spot tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Until then, I will see you guys then. Everybody stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please, please, please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. Because it doesn't matter where you lean, right, left, center. This is an issue that affects every single one of us as Americans on a day-to-day basis in this country. And listen, this issue, we got to get resolved. We've had too many tragedies with this. There's a number of solutions to solve it. That multiple people, multiple different backgrounds have proposed. We've got to employ these. We've got to pass these into legislation. So let's make sure we do what we got to do to put the appropriate pressure on our legislators to put those into action. All right, we will see you guys 2024 in review again tomorrow at noon Eastern, 8 o'clock spot at 8, a special episode of that show. As for this show, Carving Up Live, we'll see you on Thursday, same time as usual, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, live on Facebook, as well as the Carving Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Until then, we'll see y'all. Stay safe out there, everybody. Happy early New Year. God bless y'all. Peace out. Maybe the Steelers will do something. I don't know. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.